Chiron has moved into the 17th degree of Aries. And this is the image of the two prim spinsters. Poise and serenity develop when we spend time in peaceful solitude, turning within to experience our true selves. When we lack potency in the outer world, it is helpful to turn within and deepen our inner world of peaceful grace. This is also an aspect of potency that strengthens a more passive aspect of self, being rather than doing. Engagement with others is often draining and even dangerously so. At times, retreat is entirely appropriate. Seclusion as a way to deepen self-knowledge. We must be utterly true to ourselves. Something to remember, isn't it, that the world's inclination is towards doing, getting the job done, achievement of purpose. People will ask you, what do you do? They don't ask you so much, when you are being yourself, how does that feel? And this is what we're looking at here. This whole sense of the balance between being and doing is under discussion in this particular Sabian degree. And when Chiron enters this degree, we can expect there to be a need to shift perspective, to change your outlook. Perception is an attitude of mind, and mind is everything. So how we think, how we perceive, will always go through shifts over time. And there are some times when those shifts occur quite quickly. And those times are something that we can control to some extent. If our life becomes very busy indeed, and we simply don't understand it, we just don't know what's going on, is too fast for us to assimilate the understandings, then it's time just to slow down, turn within, spend time alone. And a lot of people find that difficult, particularly outgoing people, and Aries is most assuredly an outgoing type. But here we have an example of where that is not the case. This is the exception. This is the time when Aries looks within to determine, who am I? How do I feel? What do I think? Unsullied by input from the madding crowd. Our involvement with the world at large shifts our perceptions, shifts our feelings, shifts our sense of self very deeply indeed. And it's quite difficult to actually know who we are with all that noise. We react against other people's opinions. We agree with them when we don't really have an opinion. We don't know what's going on, so we take sides. And we shape ourselves through how we shape our thoughts. And we do that without sufficient depth of self-consultation. And with Chiron, we have a very good opportunity to shift our perception. This is the essential teaching of Chiron. Of course, it's called the wounded healer, and the reason for that is that the healing that occurs through Chiron's action occurs because we shift our perception of what has happened. That's how it works. So what we perceive to have been a wound, typically in the first few months of life, because of bad parenting, is actually not a wound at all when you see it differently. We all of us feel to be somewhat wounded. And Chiron is saying, no, that's not the case. Unless you want it to be the case. If you want it not to be the case, then that's an option available to you. And when you actually interpret what happened to you as a child differently, most particularly when you interpret it as the inevitable result of a decision you came to before incarnation. You set this drama up for yourself so that you would have this wound, as we call it, such that you can overcome it. Without something like that to be the grit for our work, we wouldn't overcome things. We wouldn't learn the skills involved in the overcoming. Life is not really about having a good time. It's about development, becoming better now than you used to be. And you won't do that unless there's a challenge. And so we incarnated into a challenge on purpose so that we could have that challenge. We wanted it. However dark that challenge might seem to you now, there's a higher place of looking at it where you claim it first. Everything that's ever happened to you, you claim that. I did that. I attracted into my life out of choice. Not a choice I've made consciously in this lifetime, granted. So it's difficult to believe this. But it's a matter of faith. It's an article of faith that we have free will. And this gift is given to the soul. And the soul is operating free will by having us, ourselves, our personalities, be this incarnation, experience these experiences, such that the soul can fix it, as it were, develop the attitudes and skills and perceptions and ways of being that deal with that problem. And what we need to develop in order to deal with that problem becomes the most precious life skill that we have. In my case, my father got angry if I was sitting in his chair when he came home from work. So I developed the ability to feel his presence from a distance before he'd actually become a noise in our environment. He became a presence. And when I was sitting in his chair, I could feel him walking up the garden path, and I would avoid the difficult situation. So having a somewhat angry, bullying father became an advantage to me, in that now I have the sensitivity to avoid angry, blameful people. And that's tremendous. That's a life skill. Also, knowing that I've done that, I can say what I'm saying now. I can help people. So that which could have been seen by me as a terrible childhood was just a training for what I needed to do later. And this is Chiron's operation. This is Chiron shifting our perception. It's not a trivial matter. We're actually trying to retrain the synaptic patterning. The synapses create what's going on in the mind, and their habitual way of being creates a track of habitual behavior in our lives. So we have to untrain the synaptic inclinations. You can't do that by untraining. You have to train it to do something else instead. So instead of thinking that, instead of feeling that, you just move into an alternative. You train yourself to do something instead. So whatever used to trigger you into negativity, you turn that trigger into a trigger towards positivity. It's a trick. You need to learn it. And it's not going to be easy to learn it when you're in the noise of the world, the pushing and pulling and bullying and sucking and all that goes on as soon as you step out of your house. In fact, as soon as you get out of bed, most of it happens indoors anyway. So here we have the idea of Chiron as the shifting agency, the shift of perception, moving into this place of seclusion. Aries 17 is how to enjoy seclusion. Now, there are two prim spinsters. A prim spinster is somebody that has a very definite sense of right and wrong behaviour, and they can't really share that very deeply, so they're not married. But they're twins, they two of them doing it together, and they've set up this way of being together which checks out objectively with somebody else who does the same thing. And that is very predictable. It's deeply peaceful because of that. There's this sense of monastic certainty. What you do today is what you do every day. There's nobody going to tell you different. Nobody's going to question what you're doing if you stay to that rhythm. Now, this way of being is delightfully peaceful, where you have no options, no decisions to make, no right and wrong, no blame or praise. You're just free of all of that. And we can take this to a higher level by deciding that rather than just take time off to check out how we are when we're just being, not doing anything, we're just being ourselves, we could actually make a life path of this, which is what the SPINSTERS have done. That's how they live forever. And when we find ourselves to be aware that all of the pushings and pullings, the hormonal appetites that we have and ambitions to be important and recognized, when all of that just drifts away, we're left with this lovely sense of life as just being delightful for no other reason than it is. And isness becomes our way of being. We are. We are not this, that, or the other. We simply are. And that is a very high mystical attainment.